All right, guys, we're here with lesson 5 from module 6. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about something we've done before, and that's measurement using a ruler or a meter stick. So we're going to be measuring to the nearest quarter inch and the nearest half inch. And I'm going to show you a review on how to do that. And the new learning that we're going to do is being able to take the information that we get from measurements and put it into a table or a graph. So we're going to combine something we've done before, measurement, with something that we're doing currently, which is graphing and data collection. So we're going to bring those two things together and be able to learn sort of a new skill. Let's get started by showing you a sample of what this might look like. I'm going to draw a ruler, but keep in mind this isn't to scale. It's not like I'm not drawing actual inches or anything like that. I'm sort of enlarging what a ruler would look like here. So here we go. There's our ruler. And I'm going to draw, I'll make this like, we'll pretend this is like 4 inches long, this section of the ruler. So my halfway point right there is 2 inches. 3 inches. That down here would be 4 inches. And then halfway here would be 1 inch. And then the beginning would be 0 inches right there at the start. Okay. So I have 4 inches set on here. I don't like how that 4 looks though, so let's, you know what, let's just undo that. There we go, that's slightly better, though still messy. Now I'm gonna put my half-inch sections in here, do that in black. So we know that halfway between 0 and 1 is right here, and that's a ½ inch. We know that halfway between 1 and 2 is 1.5. Halfway between 2 and 3 is 2.5. Halfway between 3 and 4 is 3.5. This should look really familiar because this looks like how we divided up wholes when we were doing our fraction unit in module 5. So now I have whole inches here, whole units, and I have divided those into halves. So I have some extra black markings here on my pretend ruler. And we're gonna go ahead and put in quarter inches as well. So a quarter, or a fourth, we learned in our fraction unit, is half of a half. So I'm gonna divide each ½ inch in half again. So there's 1/4 there, quarter. So see, now I have in this hole between 0 and 1, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. So I've split it into fourths or quarters. I'm going to do that for every hole here. So I'm going to split each segment of my line here that's remaining, like between 2 and 2.5, split that in half. And then split between 2.5 and 2 3/4, split that in half. And then I'll do that again here between 3 and 3.5, as well as between 3.5 and 4. And so now I have quarters on my ruler as well. Okay, so that's a review of what a ruler looks like, an inch. Obviously, we could keep dividing this further into 8ths and 16ths and things like that. But for the purposes of today, that's plenty. Let's say I had something to measure. Oops, that's not what I want to do. I have a rectangle to measure. And I'm going to measure to the nearest, oh, this is the nearest inch first, just as a review. Okay, so if I have to go to the nearest inch, I have to decide, is this closer to 1, 2, 3, or 4? Well, I can pretty quickly rule out 3 and 4 because it's clearly not closer to those than it is to 1 or 2. So it falls between 1 and 2. So my answer is either 1 or 2. And this goes back to that rounding stuff that we did. If you're halfway or more to something, then you round up. If you're not yet halfway to something, you round down. So in this case, we've passed the 1 inch mark. We've passed the 1.5 mark, but we haven't gotten to the 2 mark, which means we're between 1.5 and 2. That means we round up. We would call this about 2 inches if we were rounding to the nearest inch. Now I can also take that same thing. Oops, let's redo that. I can take that same thing and I can round it to the nearest ½ inch. So now I've narrowed in and I'm saying it's either, a half inch is either something that ends in a half or a whole inch. So it's either 1.5 or it's 2. I have to figure out, is it closer to 1.5 or is it closer to 2? And this mark right here, this quarter mark, in this case a 3/4 mark, can tell me if I have made it to the halfway point or not. And in this case, I could draw a little thing in here and say, if I extended this down, I could see that I have not yet gotten to that quarter mark. So I have not yet gone beyond halfway, which means I round back down. So this would be 1.5 inches if I was rounding to the nearest half an inch, because it is not yet to that halfway point between 1.5 and 2. Say it extended over here and it had passed that quarter mark, then I could round up to 2. But since it hasn't, I have to round back. Let's get rid of that for a second. And finally, I can round to a 1/4 inch. Now, a 1/4 inch can be anything from a whole to 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, or obviously the next whole up. So in this case, I'm going to, again, draw in where this hits um, right here. So I'm deciding now, is this thing closer to this 3/4 mark, or is it closer to the half inch mark? Well, again, we could eyeball where the halfway point is. The halfway point's right about there. And since we have passed that halfway point, we round in that direction. We round up to 1 3/4 inches. Okay. So you're going to have to do some of that work in your lesson today on the Google Slides. It's going to ask you to find things to the nearest inch. So you're going to often see work that has things that aren't, in the past, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you have seen work where the diagram comes out, pretty close to like right where you need it to be. So say this was being measured to a half, it might just go like that. And it makes it really clear to you that it's a half. But today you need to learn a little bit more about rounding. So you're going to get things that are, not right on a measurement, not right on a line. And you're going to have to sort out what it's closest to by rounding. So that's sort of skill number 1. And that's the first thing you need to pay attention to. Now, the other thing that you need to pay attention to here is that you might be asked to put these things in charts. So you might be given, 4 different shapes. You might measure this one first, and maybe we're measuring this to the nearest half an inch. And so we could say that I'll make my little table over here. And you might have something that looks like this. So we have figures. Oh, that was not a straight line. Figure 1, 2, 3, and 4, or shape. Length to half inch. Sorry, I ran out of space there. Got a little sloppy. So this first one to the nearest half inch, let's take a look at it. We look, is it closer to 2, 2.5, or 3? I can see that it has passed this halfway point. So it is definitely more than 2. So now I have to narrow it down. Is it closer to the 2.5, or is it closer to the 3? Well, if I look here, it is not yet at the halfway point. So I round back down to 2.5. So my first figure is 2.5 inches. Okay, let's do another figure. Whoops. I'm undoing the wrong stuff there. So I could get another shape here. And perhaps this one is that long right there. So I have to find it to the nearest half inch. Draw my line down. It falls right in there on the number on the ruler. So it's either 1 1.5, or 2. I can rule out 1 right away because it's crossed this halfway point right here, or beyond that. And so I have to decide, is it 1.5 or is it 2? And so I look at the halfway point between those two markings, which would be in this case 1 3/4. We've gone past the halfway point, and anytime we've gone past the halfway point, you round up. So the measurement here would be about 2 inches. And let's do 2 more examples of this. A really short one here. So we have to look at this and we say, actually I have to change it slightly. Okay. So this is either 0, 1/2, or 1. It falls within this 1 inch range. It is not 1 because, oops, it is not 1 because we have not yet crossed the half-inch mark. So I can rule that out right away. And then I can eyeball sort of where it falls on this. And I can see that it has crossed the halfway point between 0 and 1/2. It's crossed that 1/4 inch mark, which means that we round it in this direction towards 1. So this is going to be 1/2 inch, or approximately 1/2 inch. And we'll do one last thing that we can measure here. Keep selecting the wrong tool. There we go. Okay. So in this case, it's going to either be 3, 3.5, or 4. 4 is the quickest one to rule out because if we haven't even crossed the halfway point, it certainly can't, we're not going to skip the halfway point and go all the way to 4. So it's either 3 or 3.5. The next thing that we do in this case is we look to see where this falls on the ruler. It falls right there. And remember, if we're deciding between the 3 here and the 3.5 here, we see, has the shape, the length of the shape, gone beyond the halfway point, which is right there. It has not. It's less than 1/2, which means we round back down to 3 inches. And so now we've created a table with all information. In the future, you might be asked to either do a word problem with that information, or you might be asked to graph that information in some way. But now you've created, using your ability to measure accurately, you've created a table with which you now can work. You can either use that information, like I said, in a word problem. You can use that information to create whatever type of graph is needed. But measuring accurately is the first step to creating a table that's reliable because you have information that you know is correct and accurate. If you guys have any questions on how to do this, whether it be how to measure accurately, or whether it be how to use that information and get it into a table, please let me know. With that said, I will see you guys tomorrow with our next math lesson.